I'm delighted to have the privilege of sharing the OECD view on resilience and the methodology behind the analysis of resilient systems. So let me just try to share my screen now. Let me just a moment. Okay. Okay, just a moment. Okay, I'm opening. Okay. So let me just stress for the time being that we face unprecedented challenges, as you all know. And then what characterizes the new context that we are facing is a very deep economic and social crisis. And that is something that I wish to convey to you in this occasion. Maybe just an NGO's perspective. So first of all, what is resilience? We probably have discussed enough in the multilateral assistance environment about the different aspects that relate to resilience. And so I would like to summarize only that we have the three key aspects of resilience. So it's the capacity to surmount shocks, external shocks, or disruptive phenomena. And then we have absorbing capacity as a first layer of resilience. And that is the ability of a system to prepare for, mitigate, or prevent negative impacts using predetermined coping responses in order to preserve and restore essential basic structures and functions. And then we have adaptive capacity, and that is the ability of a system to adjust, modify, or change its characteristics and actions to moderate potential future damage and to take advantage of opportunities so that it continue to function without major qualitative changes in function or structural identities. Examples of adaptive capacity include diversification of livelihoods, involvement of the private sector in delivering basic services, and introducing drought resistant seed, for example. And then we have transformative capacity, which is the ability to create a fundamentally new system so that the shock will no longer have an impact. This can be necessary when ecological, economic, or social structures make the existing system untenable. Examples of transformative capacity include the introduction of conflict resolution mechanisms, urban planning measures, and other actions to stamp out corruption, for example. And so let me stress at this point that in the face of an external shock like no other shock that we have witnessed in decades, like the COVID-19 pandemic, we are faced with the opportunity of overcoming a great challenge in a way that we can bring about transformative capacity into many different subsystems of social and civilizatory resilience, if you will. So this is something that we can come up with. We can continue in a discussion after we set the tone of our framework of resilient system analysis. So the bottom line is boosting resilience involves actively understanding the risk landscape and how it impacts on systems. That is how society functions in each context. So we need to, it is about determining at which layer of society those risks are best managed, applying a set of resilience principles to strengthen the system's capacity to absorb shocks or to adapt and transform so that they are less exposed to shocks. So if we go into the concept node, what is the system? Or how do we appraise a system from our methodology? So resilient systems analysis uses a systems approach. A system could be many things, including a unit of society, for example, an individual or household, a community or a state, of the natural environment, for example, a forest, or a physical entity, for example, an urban infrastructure network. So the system used as an example in these guidelines comes from the sustainable livelihoods approach as seen from our perspective at the OECD. So a livelihood comprises the capabilities, assets, and activities required for a means of living. A livelihood is sustainable when it can cope with and recover from stresses and shocks and maintain or enhance its capabilities and assets both now and in the future while not undermining the natural resource base. So under our sustainable livelihoods approach, the well-being of a community depends on a system with 6 different categories of assets or capitals. So that is financial capital, human capital, natural capital, physical capital, political capital, and social capital. The assets that make up each of these categories of capital will differ from context to context. So from our perspective of what a resilient system analysis is all about, is a toolkit to systematically analyze resilience and then integrate resilience aspects into the development and humanitarian programming through a step-by-step approach to resilient systems analysis. So a tool that helps field practitioners to prepare for and facilitate a successful multi-stakeholder resilience analysis workshop, for example, and then design a roadmap to boost the resilience of communities and societies, and then to integrate the results of the analysis into their development and humanitarian programming. And that is essential in the way that we look at activities from a grassroots approach that is ever more vital in the face of rebuilding communities and rebuilding regions in the context of the very dire and very deep and very worrisome consequences of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. So resilient system analysis will provide the key actors in the field with a shared view of the risk landscape that people face, an understanding of the broader system that people need for their all-around well-being, an analysis of how the risk landscape affects the key components of the well-being system, which components are resilient, which not, and why a shared understanding of power dynamics and how the use or misuse of power helps or hinders people's access to the assets they need to cope with shocks. And then based on all of that, a shared vision of what needs to be done to boost resilience in the system and how to integrate these aspects into policies, strategies, and development efforts at every layer of society. So how can we use a resilient system analysis? Many, in that context, in the development assistant or official development assistant context, many donors are requiring their partners to base their programming on a theory of change linked to a log frame analysis. The resilience of system analysis facilitates both of these. The outputs of a resilient system analysis provide a platform for constructing a theory of change, often used in development programming to support overall analysis, strategy, and critical thinking. So this type of analysis provides information for the 3 key steps in constructing a theory of change. So analyzing the context, exploring assumptions and hypotheses for changes in the future, and assessing evidence for future change. So that's in broad terms the context. So we aim at producing a roadmap following this theory of change logic. So through this type of analysis, we aim to develop log frames that are often used to document and monitor humanitarian and development programs. So, so as to provide a concrete vision of the desired program impact and outcomes, to show how project outputs can contribute to these outcomes and impact, and to providing a better and more coherent risk information for the assumptions component of the log frame. So the main purpose of resilient system analysis is to provide valuable inputs into policies, strategies, and programs rather than to support detailed project design. And so in this context, what we talk about is following this methodology through 4 steps. Step 1 is defining the governance and scope of any given strategy, and that applies, of course, to things such as, for example, grassroots social entrepreneurship initiatives, or for example, and then closely linked to that, of course, we have intangible cultural heritage initiatives that are linked to local development. So first we need to define the key stakeholders and how these stakeholders are relevant to local or grassroots development goal. And then we go to step 2, which is pre-analysis and briefing pack. And so that's a complex process. But then we talk about how to develop ways to validate methodologies of interactive or participatory dynamics that can feed back into this methodology of what it means to develop the roadmap that is acceptable to relevant stakeholders at the grassroots level. And then we go to workshop methodologies. And then we have 5 steps of the workshop. First, we have 5 modules going from risk, stresses, and their impact on systems analysis. And then we go to the analysis of the characteristics of the system and its component. Then we go to a 3rd step of analysis of stakeholders and processes influencing a given system. Then we go to identifying gaps in the system's resilience. And then we go to developing a roadmap to strengthen resilience. And then that's something that it's easy to say, but it's very difficult to really implement. And so that's why this is something that we talk about from a very general, broad perspective. But if it's to become real or implementable, that is the domain of grassroots stakeholders and leaders such as NGOs, for example. So using this roadmap to boost resilience shows what policy and programming changes are needed to boost resilience in a particular context, prioritized in terms of A, urgent actions, and B, medium-term actions, and of course, actions that can be started much later. So in most contexts, individual organizations and actors will choose which of the actions of the roadmap to implement based on specific mandates, expertise, programming timeframes, and resources. Different actors can do certain things. Other actors can use their power to influence change, and in other areas, a shared advocacy strategy could be useful. All of the actions prioritized by the roadmap should be picked up by at least one actor. So this is, in very broad terms, what I would bring to your attention in terms of, in a way of setting the tone of a more richer, broader, detailed discussion as to what it means to bring resilience or what it means to build resilience in this very challenging ongoing context of a pandemic. And in that sense, it never as today is it true that NGOs make the big difference in building back social and community local resilience in this very key arena of the intangible cultural heritage. And so I because of the time limitations, I think that this is just a way of setting the tone definitely we would, you know, in the course of this full day and the second day of this forum, there will be much to be said as to how, in very different specific context, resilience can be built, strengthened, in order to not only reactivate, because that's something that from, in our case, the OECD, we hear a lot from different stakeholders, to reactivate economic and the economy or social, the social tissue, but it's about something even more challenging, which is to reconstruct social communities, to reconstruct economies, to build back better what has been hit by an unprecedented crisis like the global pandemic of the COVID-19. So in this sense, I very much thank you for the privilege of having this space to share our thoughts, and definitely to continue our dialogue and discussion as to what it is to what it means to build our communities in a stronger, more sustainable and more resilient new social pact. And then NGOs have a crucial contribution to that endeavor. So thank you very much.